Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing very well. And I know you guys are not going to hear this for a little bit, but we're already deep into January of 2020, almost about to. In other words, even the latest people have finally taken down their Christmas and holiday things and stuff like that. And everybody always asks me about the weather here. And it's like, believe it or not, yesterday here in Miami and South Florida, it went into the low 40s, high 30s. Where we live out, it's agricultural, so for some reason, it feels cooler out here. Okay, so of course we're like, oh my God, it's Antarctica, because we're such wimps out here, cold weather wimps. And of course we had the fireplace going, which, I have a real fireplace, but yeah. And I had to bring in a lot of my animals off the porch, the birds and even some of my chickens that my frizzies that are more like they're healthy, but you gotta be real careful with them with the temperature, and around here sometimes we get these big gusts of wind. So yeah, in other words, I have some of them still in here. So I usually have some weird animal noises, but if you hear them closer than usual, it's because they're over there on the other side of this door in the living room, because even though the temperatures are going to go down a little bit tonight, not as much, but they're still too cool. And like I was saying, we get these drafts coming in, and birds and avian, they're kind of susceptible to that. Besides loving my animals, I work really hard with them, and I'm not going to lose them. There's some stuff they'll tolerate, but that's not one of them. But anyway, guys, let's get to the good stuff, all right? And you know that the good stuff has to do with who my guest is. And I know you guys are going to be just excited as I am. Okay, this is a gentleman by the name of Dean McMurray. Now, Dean is also known as a military medium. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a native of northern Minnesota. He's a 24-year Army veteran. Okay, he lives now in North Dakota with his wife and his 2 children. Now, we're going to ask him about this, but he was not always aware of his abilities to communicate with spirits. All right. And it wasn't until after his deployment, but I'm not going to get too much into that because I want him to tell us about that. And he's a spiritual medium. And you guys I've said it before. There's a difference between a psychic and a medium. You could be a psychic and not necessarily be a medium. All right. So that's, I always point that out, depending on who my guest is. Now, and of course, being a medium, what you do is you contact loved ones, angels, spirit guides, by connecting, from the earth plane to the spirit realm. And these souls, they communicate telepathically through feelings and pictures. And other words, sometimes it's not per se words, even though every person communicates differently. And And he's also a clairvoyant. All right, so he sees visions of people, places, things of the past, present, and future, and he's also clairsentient. So he can also receive psychic senses, including smell, taste, and touch. All right, and he's an empath, okay, which is he can feel the sensations of the physical and emotional states of being, which we got to ask him about that, because I'm sure that he must have a lot of boundaries set up, because I imagine if not, he'll just get streamrolled with that. So let's get to it, and we're gonna ask him about exactly how he realized that he had this ability. So how are you today, Dean?
I'm great, Marlene. Thanks for having me on today.
No, on the contrary, it is my pleasure. And I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests. How
Absolutely.
did you discover, first of all, that you had these abilities? Childhood,
Sure.
adult, what happened?
Well, you talked about a little bit reading the bio coming in is, going back almost 10 years now that, I returned from my last deployment with the military.
Okay.
And I came home, and quite honestly, I call it just all holy hell started breaking loose in my home at the time. And what I mean by that is a lot of paranormal activity started happening, meaning clocks and pictures started flying out the wall.
Really?
And for a guy that wasn't open to spirit, and a guy that wasn't open to the metaphysical or spiritual nature of things, it was pretty unsettling at the time, because it was something, obviously, as you and your listeners know, that you can't quite always put logic to what happens in the spiritual state of things, right?
Right.
And right, so so I wanted answers, and I was quite beside myself, and I knew that my wife had been seeing a local psychic here in the
Okay.
area, and I was jokingly referring to her as the voodoo chick. That was my name. You and this voodoo chick. That's what I was. And of course, what are the first words out of my mouth when all this craziness happens? Get the voodoo chick on the phone. I want some answers. Because it was,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny, because I found myself, I was like, oh, maybe it was a little bit of karma. Like, hey, you called it, this lady. But at the same time, I didn't know, anybody that did that. And so I thought she came in and just made it all go away. I didn't know what somebody does in this situation. Are you still there? Did we lose
Yes.
our connection?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, so all right,
Okay.
and so with that, she came over and proceeded to tell me that my grandfather was there and everything, and I just wasn't in a space of listening to or receiving that message in a sense. So um, I kind of shut down in a sense, because I thought my preconceived notion was that she was going to make all the craziness stop. And that's what she wasn't there to do that day. Basically, she left and nothing changed. It really only got louder for me, in a sense, is meaning the activity in the home started picking up.
So you're
And
in other words, you were thinking you didn't think it really had to do with you specifically. You were just in a household that this was happening.
yeah, and it wasn't
Okay.
and I didn't notice it prior. Like, we
Okay.
had lived there many years prior to the
Okay.
deployment, so it wasn't like it's like we moved in and all this stuff happened.
Okay.
I got back from deployment, and this activity started. So I thought it
Okay.
was something that somebody could just stop. And so a couple weeks go by, and like I shared earlier, as the activity increased,
Right.
and one evening I was washing dishes, of all things, actually baby bottles, and
Okay.
my son was infant at the time, and it was around midnight, and I knew that my deceased grandmother was behind me. Now, of course, as you can assume, understand, is that I was like, how the heck do I know this is grandma? And it
Right.
was like, holy crap, like how do I know this? Well,
Yes, that
and
must
yeah,
have been.
it was that, but I just got this knowing that washed over me. It's like, well, it's grandma. She's not here to hurt you, and it's like, and I was thinking, oh my God, Dean, you're going crazy. You're going to end up in the psych ward. You're going to end up on meds.
And this was
And
like no noise. This was just a knowing. This
it
was
was just a knowing. That was it. And I went to bed and knowing that my grandmother was there, thinking that I was going crazy. And I think it's a normal progression if you know somebody's there in spirit that is a loved one that you just, hey, you want to talk to them.
right.
And so, of course, it's like, hey, grandma, how you doing? Love you, miss you, all that great stuff. And I'm laying there in bed going, you know what, Dean, this is all this is this BS. You're making it up. If she's really here, she would prove it. And immediately as those words left my head, she changed the room absolutely to ice cold, right? The temperature. And I was like, holy crap, like you got my attention. And so I laying there trying to figure out what that meant and trying to put logic to it. And then it was like my ego kicked back up again and said, you know what? It's probably off peak power. It could be the wife has the window open.
Right.
If she's really here, why don't you just touch me? And of course, again, as those thoughts left my head, and it was immediate yet firm pressure that started at the top of my head and went down all the way to my feet and pushed me right into the mattress, and where I could feel myself, being, compressed, if you will, into the mattress itself.
Yeah, it's like difficult to discount that.
Right. So it's like, by this point, if she didn't have my attention, you can imagine that
Yes.
I was like, holy bleep, 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 like what is going on?
Right.
And of course, it was about that time that I said, love you, grandma. You got to go. Like, you're freaking me out.
Right.
And as soon as I said that, it was gone. It was like it never happened, but I'm sitting up in bed out of breath and covered in sweat. And so really that event, Marlene, in a nutshell, that event for me was my awakening. And I went on a journey from that, starting that day, trying to figure out what that meant because, obviously you can't put any logic to that. It's like, what did I experience? What was that? And of course, there's a big part of me that goes, well, it's grandma. And it's like, but grandma died back in the 80s. Like,
I
how
was going to
can it be
ask you,
grandma?
was she recently deceased or it had been a while she
Yeah.
passed
So
away?
no, she passed, when I was younger and back in the 80s. And so it
Okay.
had been a number of years. And it was like, holy cow. It's like, so your mind is in that, almost
Okay.
exploding, trying to figure all this out. What, you're going from 0 to 100 in just a short, time span of time. And one of the things is that, I kind of went back to that voodoo chick again, and
Okay.
she ended up, I was like, I need to figure this out. And what does
Okay.
this mean for Dean? And she goes, you know what, you're a medium. That's what it means. And I was like, don't want to be a medium, didn't ask to be a medium. She was like, that's not the way it works, Dean. And I was like,
Yeah.
why? I had some not nice words for her because I was like, almost kind of mad at her because
Right.
and it wasn't like she made me a medium, but I was like, why is this crap happening now? And and it's like, why in life and all this? And she said, well, you need to figure out what this means for Dean. And she said, but let's just do a fun little exercise and do a test reading. And she said, I'm going to write some names down. And she said, I don't want any pressure. She said, let's just see what comes to you. And at that point, I hadn't done any readings. I hadn't received any messages. And I ended up connecting to her husband's deceased mother. And I didn't know her husband at all or their family. I didn't know anything. And, and she showed me, evidential images and details that were very specific for them. And she said, well, it was really good. But she said, you need to learn how to control it, because it was like drinking from a fire hydrant, so to speak,
Okay.
at times, and then other times it would dry up, and I
Right.
didn't know how to control it. And so I ended up taking a course in mediumship and learning how it worked for me. You
Okay.
touched on it really eloquently. I love it. You talked about how mediums interpret things from spirit differently, right? So each
Right.
medium works in their own way, so to speak.
Right.
And so I kind of had to learn almost like how to read Braille in a sense, and that's the analogy that I use, and how the universe was communicating to me, and what certain things meant, and when they would show me something, if it meant, like for example, when I see an American flag during readings,
Okay.
it means that there's a veteran connection.
Okay.
So, say if there's a male that steps forward on, the mom's side of the family or dad's side of the family,
Right.
and I see a flag, then it means, hey, there's a veteran. So, one example of that. But there was a whole learning process, and really, after taking, classes and learning about that, I really went on just practicing for really a year, and just giving readings and working on my craft, if you will.
Right.
And, not charging anything, because really, honestly, Marlene, it was Dean the soldier by day and Dean the medium by night. And, you start with family and friends,
Right.
giving readings. And then next thing you know, my phone, we were just talking about cell phones, right? And in those days, it was like, next thing you know, my cell phone was ringing off the hook and going, who is this? And they're like, oh, you don't know me. I'm a friend of a friend of a friend.
Right.
And so, that word of mouth was spreading. And I was like, and I was getting close to retirement, and I knew that, it was like, boy, this is bigger than what I'm thinking it is. And
Right.
I made the joke early on in my development, saying, what am I going to be doing? Giving readings in my basement? And, I'm sure somebody in the universe was going, yeah, you will. And,
Yeah.
and in boats and in planes and in Ubers and wherever, you're guided to serve. So, the thing is that it's interesting. Every day is different. There's no 2 days the same doing this kind of work. So it was. So I've been retired now for about 6 years.
Okay.
And doing this work full time ever since. Since I left or retired from the military. So. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, looking back now in hindsight,
Yes.
did you see stuff that now you recognize this, maybe before I thought it was my imagination, or was there a triggering event that made your abilities all of a sudden like blossom, for lack of a better word? I don't know. I know. Like, or was it something you say, man, you know what, this has been around all the time. I was just like pushing it away.
That's a great question. I was kind of doing that hindsight look, and there was a couple events that I do remember, but kind of when I come out of the quote unquote metaphysical closet and said, hey, I'm a medium, right? And saying, kind of owning who I was. It was funny because my mom, right away, she was like, oh, that totally makes sense. That totally, she goes, and I was like, really? You knew? Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you were always a sensitive kid, and you had imaginary friends. And I was like, I don't even remember half that stuff. And here my mom is, telling me all this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool to hear it.
Yeah.
And saying that, it totally makes sense that I, have these abilities. But so one of the things that I would share, one quick story that
Sure.
when I was looking back, and I was doing a book project, and I was like, how far do I go back and look on my, my abilities, if they're, in my life, and saying if I could find events or remember events in my life that going, ha, look at that. I bet you that was my,
Right.
intuition. And one time that I went back, and it was when I was in Afghanistan, and this was
Okay.
in the early 2000s, right? And we're talking before
Okay.
the ground war in Iraq. And one of the things, one of our missions was in those early days is to do mounted, what's called mounted combat patrols. So you take vehicles and go up and patrol, heavily traveled routes and such, and do a bunch of other things. Well, one of them was a night patrol, and we had stopped along the route, and that's a big no-no. You don't stop. You never stop unless you
Okay.
absolutely have to, and especially if you do stop, you don't stop obviously in a choke point or any area that could possibly put something underneath the road.
Right.
And one of the things that I remember, I wasn't in charge of the patrol that evening, but I kept on hearing a voice, and it kept on saying, you need to move the vehicles up another 500 meters. And I was like, at first it was like, what the heck? Did I just hear that right? And
Yeah.
then I heard it again. Hey, you need to move the vehicles up another 500 meters. So, of course, I'm on the radio trying to get a hold of somebody saying, hey, can you move the vehicle, this line of vehicles, so move them up further. And I can't get a hold of anybody. And so I remember running up to the front of the lead vehicle saying, hey, we're in a danger area. You need to move the lead vehicle up quite a ways so we can get all the vehicles through this area. And I really believe that not only listening to what I'm trusting now is, whether it's
Right.
my higher self or spirit or my intuition,
Right.
but not only that, but we had some early technology that was being fielded at the time that we really still believe today, that if it wasn't to due to those couple facts, that we wouldn't be here today talking to you.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. So I'm always, still today, I'm a big proponent of talking about or empowering others to trust their intuition and saying,
Yes. Yes.
would you stake your life on it? And
Yes.
saying, are you going to listen to it? And I think it's so interesting when I get to talk to, in the scope of my duties or my work now, and saying, if I get the opportunity to talk to police, fire, EMS, first responders, and saying, or soldiers, whomever, and saying, sometimes you'll catch little stories. They won't say intuition, but
Yeah. Yeah.
saying, have you ever had,
Yes.
your gut tell you this? And they're
Yes.
like, every damn time, or
Yeah.
they'll tell you all the time. And saying, so there's, yeah, a lot of cool stories come
You
from
know
folks
what?
that,
And sometimes you do have the benefit of finding out what bullet you dodged, and sometimes you don't. There's just no
that's
way
right.
to quantify it. You just
Yeah. Right.
you never get that confirmation of, hey, wow, thank God I followed my gut.
Right.
Unless you're like one of those, like, don't get on that plane, and then it crashes, then you go, man, that was good, I didn't get on that plane, then
Right.
you know. But yeah, I think a lot of people, especially when you're, maybe what your job is to be very analytical or fact based.
Mm-hmm.
You have like this contradiction, like you kind of like, I think your self-talk is like, are you really gonna, are you stupid, what are you doing,
Right. Right.
that inner dialogue. But like you said, I
Yeah.
think after a while you're like, okay, I'm gonna go with it. What's the worst that can happen? But nobody will know why I'm doing or not doing
Right.
a certain thing.
Right. And that's a great point, is like, a lot of people, people think that they have to live, we're in the social media world, right? And everything is
Yes.
for everybody to see. But when you practice your intuition, you don't have to announce that if you don't
Yeah.
want to. You don't
Exactly.
have to, take the Instagram selfie and go,
Yeah.
oh, feeling
Yes.
cute, might practice my intuition later, don't know. It's like, you don't have to say that. It's like, but
You're right.
if
You're
you
right.
want to, you can steal that one maybe later. But the thing is that,
Yes.
it's a lot of people use it daily, and they're either they're conscious of it, or on the majority B, that they're not conscious of it. But what I'm finding is the people that are making that they're really moving mountains and they're really going leaps and bounds are the people that are embracing their intuition.
Yes.
And we're seeing that from, Fortune 500 business owners
Yes.
to, it doesn't matter what you do. I don't care if you're, you know, uh, everywhere from the White House all the way to a ditch digger. I don't care what you do.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. But people of all backgrounds and religions, race, creeds, colors, doesn't matter. It's,
Yes.
just an ability, and everybody
Right.
has it.
And I think that some people have it on all the time, and then some people have it under either under stressful, situations or life or death is when it pops up, and then the rest of the time they don't really like get it, that flash or that gut, like don't go down that road or stay
Right.
home or whatever. And then
Well,
there's others that, like you said, either they flex the muscle,
yes.
and I think that helps also for you to get more messages. And you pointed something out, which is that a lot of times something like that speaks to you in symbols, and every person has symbols, interprets symbols a different way. Do you see what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like
Yes.
it's
Yes.
almost like a message that's just for you because I'm feeding it to you in a way that your whatever will understand it.
Yes, abs. Well, and that's a great point, Marlene, and thanks for bringing that up. And really, you think about it when you logically look at things, right? From That's how we understand and that's how we learn in life. So from our experiences that we've had since birth till however old somebody is now, that is how we based our experiences or our knowledge base on that, right? So whatever you watch, learn, listen to, experience, whatever, saying that's our knowledge base, right? That is our language and everything. But the thing is understand that's all great for this earthly or 3D plane. But when we go to the sixth sense, then there is the other level, right? Almost that
Yes.
other dimension, and saying, okay, if they're in a sense trying to communicate to us, in a
Uh-huh.
sense they have to feed it back so we understand what the heck they're talking about, and saying, and I know a
Exactly.
lot of times, I'm sure my spirit guide is like drinking and shaking their head going, oh my god, this guy is so he's such a bonehead, and sometimes I am, sometimes I am the typical just bonehead, and saying, I just didn't see that. Even though I do this every day and all the time, and it's like, but I still deal with life, and I'm still a dad, I'm still a husband, and
Yeah, of course.
and I do everyday normal stuff. But I love how you bring up the fact of, you said something of flexing the muscle, and I love thinking of the fact of intuition as a muscle, and a lot of people don't
Yes.
realize that. I always use the analogy of, if you just took one Pilates class or one class, like group exercise, and you
Right.
never continued exercising, you would just be sore as hell the next day. You wouldn't gain anything. But if you continually go and exercise your abilities or strengthen your muscles, then it's going to increase for you. And that's the same with intuition. So if somebody out there is taking one class or reading one book or whatever, you can't just do one thing and go, oh,
Yes.
I'm enlightened now, I'm good to go. And
Or
saying, you got to work, you got to continue, you got to put in the work, and you got to put
right.
in the time and learn how it works for you, because what you're reading and what you're learning are other people's experiences and what other people are teaching. But then you got to take all of that and put it as an overlay to how your life is running and how it fits in your life. And if you want to use it,
Of
right?
course.
Because some
Well,
of it you might go, you know what, I don't like what that person is saying or teaching. I don't like that. Or I don't resonate with that, and saying that's okay.
right.
But at the same time, is like, you got to put it into action. And so I'm a big proponent of that as well, because if you don't take anything and put it in action,
No
it'd be like,
execution.
you can tell some good stories, but that's about it.
Well, and also, and this I think goes for a lot of stuff that people try things and they go, "Oh, I'm not good at it." Like, how often did you try it? A couple of times. That's just like, okay, really? You mean you didn't practice it or try it or, get into like, no, I
Yeah.
can tell I'm not good at it. It's like, of course, they don't understand that something like this, just like any other thing, ability, you need to practice it.
Yeah,
You got to
absolutely.
get your body and your mind coordinated to and but I think also a lot of, when I was saying before, I think a lot of people have that critical, self-criticizing voice.
Yep.
Like, even though nobody knows it, they're like, "Oh, this is stupid. Like, why am I doing this?" Oh, like, like exactly like what you said. Like, they've got this big, the focus on them, like this invisible camera. that's
Right.
that's aware that you're such an idiot. And it's like, stop it. And unless something really, like, that they can't deny it happens, they poo-poo it, they walk
Hmm.
away from it. And I think a lot of times, like I said, these are the people that could have dodged the bullet, but they didn't because they wouldn't listen to it. And of course, something happened, but they're not around to say, you know what? I had a feeling about this. Um, and now here you go. You started embracing it. You started getting
Hmm.
calls. What happens, Dean, when let's say you go out in the public?
Hmm.
Do people do you have spirits that come up to you and say, "Hey, I want you to give this message to this person, or you're going to meet this person"? How does that work for you?
Well, so that's a great question. I got some really big boundaries around this,
Okay.
and it's interesting. I just talked about this with some of my students
Okay.
here just last week. And so to me is I work with a really tight group of ethics. And one of the first things is that unless I'm really guided by spirit to say, hey, you need, like, say if I'm around somebody and it's like, I very clearly get from spirit, you need to go up to that individual
Okay.
and deliver a message. Then if I do that, obviously I'm going to introduce myself and tell them what that I do. However, I will always give or lead with, are you open to receiving a message from spirit? And if
Okay.
they tell me, oh, hell no, then, all I'm going to do is go, okay, and maybe go home and write it down and trust that,
Okay.
the universe will make it known. But
Right.
the other piece is that I just don't walk around and be like, oh my God, you got a grandma. I won't just run up to somebody and do that. I got very clear boundaries around that
Yes.
big. And I don't, and that is a huge thing with me as well, is I don't let other people just just
Okay.
read me. It's like, so because I believe that our energy is very sacred space,
Yes.
and you should have somebody's permission prior to not only reading them but working on them energetically,
Yes.
sharing their information, all that stuff. So I got big boundaries around that. And because number one too, I look at it from an aspect of saying, would I like that, or how would I like to be treated in a sense? And I just kind of come from it, saying, okay, do I just go up and start reading them, so to speak? But no, that doesn't happen. But do I get, you talked earlier in the beginning about being an empath. A lot of times, will I go into either a store? In fact, there's a local. My daughter does competitive dance, and
Okay.
I actually went into a local store here, the only one in our area that does dance supply or whatever, and the energy is just so heavy. And so every time I go in there, I have a little bit more of my guard up, and so I
Okay.
kind of put a double protection up. But at the
Okay.
same time, it's just like, oh, just some heavy. It's just like it can be great on the outside, but then it's like running through mud, and it's just like, whoa. And so, will I feel things and be really aware of like, ooh, this person is really dealing with something? Yeah. I'm already, just because it's automatic, I don't intentionally like, hey, I'm going to start reading your energy. But if it's
Right.
exuding off of them, just like huge, maybe they're going through something
Right.
super emotionally, if they're carrying that with them, typically I'll start picking up on that. And most empaths are like that anyways. It's like, oof, they got some stuff going on. But guess what? I've kind of matured, I guess, in my sense of saying, at the end of the day, it's still their stuff, and saying, and that's where my boundaries are, saying, I'm here to help you, but at the end of the day and the end of the session, your stuff is still your stuff.
Yes.
It's up to you to deal with it. I'll help you, but the thing is you still have to do it. And
Right.
so I can't do that.
I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it in some shows, like what you said. You have a medium run up to people, strangers, and start giving them a reading. And I'm thinking to myself, number one, sometimes, I mean, and really, in truth, you don't know behind the scenes what some of these producers do with
the editing.
The show. They edit, or it's not as surprising as it looks.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
But still, I'm thinking, you know what? There's a lot of people that, even though it might be technically a loved one, they might not be prepared for it. Yep. Yeah, everybody wants to, everybody thinks that because it's a loved one that passed away, maybe that everything was copacetic between you and this person. And sometimes it's not. It's not.
Not always. No. No, I actually got a text today from a dear friend of mine that she's very psychic. She does energy healing, and she knows. She knew that a loved one was trying to communicate with her, but she goes, I know mediumship isn't my jam. She goes, would you check in? And she did not have a great relationship with her when she was living, and and she's quite clear about that. But at the same time, it's like there's not always it's not always. I always say it's not always puppy dogs and unicorn parts. It's not. It can be very heavy. It could have been very abusive. It could be very dark. Or sometimes it's, or maybe the living did not like them at all, or whatever the case is. It's life, and not everybody has great relationships. But it's that usually makes up a small percentage, but. It does exist, and
sometimes
I think
people need a little bit more time to come around to
that too. Yeah,
where they're willing, or like you said, or they've fixed it in their head.
Right.
If you've got issues with somebody that passed away, just because they died doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're good with all maybe stuff that happened in the past. Maybe it takes a while for you to work it out.
Yeah.
And then if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, guess what? I've got this person," and they're like, "Oh." Yeah, all right. Now I can really listen to it without getting defensive. Like what people do when they're alive.
Right.
Which is like, and you tell that as something. It's like,
right. It's like, no, I hear you absolutely. And sometimes that does. It's almost like you're giving counseling to to the deceased, and it's like, oh, how did I get into this? It's
like. Let me ask you, what about that? Have you come across ghosts or spirits that are confused, that they're coming to you because you can actually hear them, see them, communicate with them, and they're like, hey, what is it? Anybody talk to me?
So that happens actually quite often, especially early on in my development.
Okay.
There was a lot of stuff. So one of the things was around the time of, if we remember back during Sandy Hook,
yes,
the school shooting, very tragic event. And actually a school teacher showed up, and I hadn't, and of course you would have to live completely 20 feet underground and covered with a rock around that time not to have heard of Sandy Hook. I mean, it was everything, right? And and I don't know why, because I was really staying away from social media just because I'm such an empath. Right. And I was not pulling up pictures of any children or just on purpose. And I was really purposely staying away from that stuff. And we don't have cable kind of for that purpose as well. And the spirit showed up and she said, hey, I'm one of the teachers from Sandy Hook. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, I'm in North Dakota, right? And I was you sure you got the right guy? And I was like, well, I'll take your message, but I'm not, it would be really poor timing for me to reach out to anybody because I would be perceived as the kook from North Dakota
Yeah.
trying to get headlines or fame.
Yes.
And, and I said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it up to you and make it, I'm going to trust that, if I'm supposed to deliver this message to your husband or somebody else, that, that it's going to happen, whether, whenever. So,
Right.
and it was interesting because she was talking about, at the time she was just want to let everybody know that the kids were okay, that she was taking care of the kids. The other thing is that is talking about the firestorm. This was before they even started talking about gun reform and all this, and she
Right.
was like talking about how such a I think the word she used was a firestorm this was going to create,
Right.
and a political firestorm and all this, and she talked about it. And so I wrote it all down and I just stuffed it away in a binder. And so sometimes the things just show up. Absolutely.
Right.
There was another time that my wife, who is very empathic as well, she was like, "Oh my God, Dean," she goes, there's a lot of people here. And she was like, "What is going on?" And I think it was around the time of, if you remember, also the Malaysian flight, right?
Yes. Yes.
And it was like people kept on coming through the door, and I was like, "Holy cow!"
Right.
And so, yeah, and it was like just kind of showing up, and so it was just crazy.
So you're
And I was
thinking,
like,
okay, this is like somebody, a bunch of people just
yeah,
died. Yeah. For
and I was like, and I was like, well, obviously, I need to, you know, start talking to these folks and see,
okay.
it's like, having
Right.
everybody outside and going, well, what do you guys want? It's like,
Well,
what?
and people don't realize that, in some of these catastrophic events, your self awareness, I imagine, is still there, and all of a sudden you're just like, what happened? Like,
Right. Well, and obviously we were aware of the Malay. Everybody was as well,
yes.
right? And at the same time as, talking about, because I know there's probably people hearing this that'll be like, well, you're just thinking that because
Right.
obviously being a medium and saying, oh, but no, because, I didn't right off the bat. I wasn't like, oop, I bet you this is all those airline folks. No, it
Right.
wasn't that. It was just like, well, obviously it was my wife first off going, what are all these people doing here? And then I was like, then I tuned in and going, oh, wow. I was like, there are a lot of people here. What's going on? And then I started listening, and then I was like, oh my God, it's, they were talking about the flight. And then there was some other details that came out
Right.
as well. But there was a lot of, you talked about crossing over, right? And
Right.
tragedies and stuff.
Right.
And there was, like, where I call them soul retrievals. So where
Mm-hmm.
you think of being stuck and everything and saying, it's okay. It's, let me help you cross over, and
Right.
trying to find find that peace for them as well.
Right.
And it really, the biggest thing is that a lot of people don't realize the confusion a lot of these souls have, because whether their death was instantaneous and they're like, how can I be dead? I was just alive.
Right.
Or it was like, I can't die, or I can't go because of my family needs me. What are they going to do?
Right.
So unfinished business, whatever the case is. Or sometimes it's, saying, I just want to be recognized and validated, that, they're scared. It's
That
like,
right
where the
there.
hell,
Yes.
quite honestly, where the hell am I?
Yeah.
And saying, until somebody goes, hey, over here, you're okay. Just calm down. It's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, and just talk to them and saying, so a lot of people don't realize that, and I know that until you have your own experience with souls in that state of not really here nor there, it's kind of, a lot of people, I think that's where the term purgatory comes up, right?
Right.
So you talk about the in-between,
Mm-hmm.
and not really earth plane, but not really heaven either,
Right.
and saying, caught in the in-between, and saying, and there's a lot of fear. a lot of fear.
Well, and like what you said, a lot of these people have those near death experiences. They'll say,
Yes.
what, I have a choice. They give me a choice, and whether as bad as they want to, especially if there were some, their body was in pain, I could go on into the hereafter, but they come back, like for what you said, they have family, they have children, perhaps, or unfinished business. Usually, it's loved ones though that pulls
Yeah.
them back. Like, I can't. But in this case, let's say if a plane goes down, you don't, that choice is evaporated. Your
Right.
body is not usable anymore, in other words.
Right.
So it's like
Yep.
what you're saying. They're like, I'm dead, but I have kids. I have a husband or a wife. I have whatever. Even personal ambition, I imagine, has to figure in there somewhere. Where, what
Well,
if you had all these things that you thought you were going to accomplish? Let's say you're a 20 something or 30 something year old, and there were things that
yep.
you wanted to do, and all of a sudden it's like, what do you mean? That's it?
Yeah, I can't be dead. Like I don't have time to be dead, right? It's
Yeah,
like
I was gonna
you,
like do
you have the
this.
rest of your life to be, it's like,
Yes,
you
yes,
have the rest of forever.
yeah,
It's like, but
yes,
I don't because we're still dealing with this three-dimensional way of thinking, and this, we
yes,
can't really conceptualize it. We can only catch glimpses of it, and even if we were given the full, um, you know, if we were shown everything, I don't even think the most brilliant mind could accurately depict everything that is shown, and that then sometimes in readings I struggle to even accurately convey what I'm seeing or experiencing, because you think of our language, the human language sometimes just fails to accurately describe the level of beauty or intensity,
hmm,
and it's like, oh, but it's a red, like you've never seen. And
right,
it's like, okay, well, what kind of red is that? And it's like, well, you've never seen it, but
right,
but all you can do is bring up to your knowledge base and saying, okay, well, it's a red, but it's beyond what you know.
right.
And so just think of it as red, but it's really cool. And, or things like that, for example. So
It's it's
uh,
it's
it's,
it's. I imagine that for. Let me ask you: have you ever had somebody that doesn't believe they're dead? How's that? That you've had to convince them. In other words, not that they're confused; it's that they really just don't get it. Either because they weren't prepared, or maybe I've heard also of people that have passed away like traumatically. In other words, or they were unconscious, and they kind of like, next thing you know is like, I'm not, I can't, my body's
right,
there and I'm here.
right.
How do you
No,
convince them?
I have, and and sometimes it's usually, like if I'm going in to do a home cleansing, like
Mm-hmm.
and if I'm with a client, and say a lot of people would call it a dowsing, and
Right.
saying because they're reporting of a haunting or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and usually I'm already tuning into the energy of the home and going, nah, I don't really think it's an evil haunting like what you would think a poltergeist, but I
Yeah.
was like, I think you got somebody that's really just confused and has been here for a long, long time. And
Okay.
usually, like in our area of the Midwest where I live, it's a lot of history, of course, throughout everywhere, right? And but the thing is we get a lot of immigrants and a lot of farmers,
Mm-hmm.
and attached to. There's a lot of old homes still, but at the same time, it's usually attached to the land. And
Yes.
there's, of course, a lot of Native American, this area where I live is rich in Native American history as well. And a lot
Right.
of actual fierce battles were actually fought. And so there's some souls that are still kind of at rest in a sense. So, yeah, so sometimes it's like, especially when it comes to homes, it's like, so if I'm talking with one client, I was doing and I said, "Oh yeah, you got an older lady here," and I think she was from Poland, I think, and talking about just about the farm and everything going on and on, and so I had to really convince her that that she was dead, and that she had passed.
It's like,
And and she was, and again, you talk about, because if I remember correctly, that was the one where she was concerned about her daughter. And I was like, and I kind of told her too, I was like, well, really judging from the way that you're dressed and everything and your energy, I'm sure that your daughter is passed as well, because I'm thinking it's like it was the 1800s or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, it's been a long time. The year is currently in this, whatever year it was probably in somewhere in the 2000s. And so the thing is that it was like, kind of just, it was more of a conversation, and it just like, they don't, in their realm, it's like they're still in that state of when they crossed. And
well, you know what? It's almost like people, that movie, of course, I'm sure you've seen it, The Sixth Sense, where they see only what they want to see.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. And that's a great, I think part of that movie is a great example. Of course, obviously Hollywood does their best to entertain, but at the same time, I think that it brings up good points of saying that, that user creator reality, and saying regardless of whether the person is deceased or the person, and at the end, obviously the psychological thriller where everybody's deceased or whatever, you only sees, I think where it's Bruce Willis was deceased or whatever it was. But the thing is that it almost brings me to the movie Lost as well, right? And the whole time everybody's almost dead. So it's like, oh, crazy. So I think that's a great example too, is like, what do you, it's kind of like that user created reality. And so it does. I think at times that when people talk about hell, the thing that I know for me, I can only speak truth for me, is that I know that from my experiences, I can tell you that, hell is a user created reality, and so is void of everything, right? And so whether it's void of God for one person, or void of light, or whether it's crawling with quote unquote demons or monsters, or the fiery infernos of hell, right?
Yes.
And whatever that is, it could be anything. It could be, good Lord, going on the Disney land ride, it's a small
over and
world.
over again. Here you go again.
It could be.
It's a small world.
Like, is that right? It's like, oh my God. It's like, but I remember one of the things that when my mother-in-law was passing, God rest her soul, and one of her things is that she was concerned with, is that she did not believe that she was worthy to go to heaven.
Wow.
And she was a very very religious in her own right, but at the same time, she didn't believe that she was worthy. And I was like, oh, and of course, my wife and I, in this whole process of her crossing, of course, my wife and I had this big long discussion. But I said, I said, we need to have a chat with her, because I said that's one thing where people get stuck, is feeling that, that they're not worthy to continue on, and saying, why would I, because I'm not worthy for my soul to go on to into heaven, what they consider, in those higher realms, and saying, then they're going to sit there, whether it's earthbound or, whatever the case is. And it was interesting, because it wasn't about convincing her. It was more about getting her to see, and in retrospect of, all the things that she considered in her mind to be good things, saying, you raised two great kids, you we go down the list. And I think for 99.9% of everybody, a lot of times, sometimes we feel we're not worthy in some aspect of life. But the other thing is that, it's good to do a kind of a review maybe prior to passing, and saying, you have had a great life.
Right.
Maybe you didn't maybe you didn't get to Arizona. Maybe you didn't go to,
Right.
Disneyland as many times as you wanted to go. But here's the thing: is that you've still lived a great life, and
Right.
so I think it's interesting. But I've had the honor and privilege of being able to do sessions for those that are in
Okay.
hospice care, and that'll be experience that I will never ever forget for as long as I'm still breathing on this in this lifetime, anyways. And it was something that was really awe-inspiring, and to be able to give them a sense of peace as well, and the family, so that their loved ones were, awaiting their transition right on the other side, and
Right.
give them validation of that. So, and really, that's what it's about. It's really about, saying, truly love never dies. It's just one,
Right.
transition from one existence to the other, and it's, you know,
And I
from
think sometimes people, like what you were saying, when people start holding themselves to these standards, like you said, sometimes they don't realize life is supposed to be messy. You're supposed to make mistakes. Like there's no
right,
such thing as a perfect human that has
no,
never maybe done terrible things, on purpose, or just because it
right,
happens. And yeah, and I see that sometimes, especially when a lot of religion works in, it kind of works against that person towards the end of their life, where they're holding themselves to these standards, which it's like, God, nobody's going to be able to live up to that.
right, right. That's, you bring up a great point, to saying that, I know we all try our best,
Right.
to do the best we can, but we make mistakes,
Yes.
whether consciously, subconsciously, whatever. We make bad decisions, but it's all part of the learning process. And really, at the end of the day, if you go deeper, when you think about it, it's the human condition, or the human ego, that is saying that is something that is bad or good, right? And so whether you
Yes.
did a bad thing or you did a great thing, it's just an action or inaction, is at the end of the day, and saying, where are you at with it, and saying, but it's, the sooner that you can find peace in your life now,
Yes.
while you're still living, you're already ahead of the game. And so if you can find that within yourself, because it's already there, you just have to have a state of allowance and start practicing that,
Let me
then
ask you, Dean, have you run across any person that's passed away who didn't believe in the afterlife? In other words, when they were alive, and this has nothing to do with like fear of hell or anything. They just one of these people that thought when you die, that's it. There's no hereafter. That's it. You go
right.
into and all of a sudden they're dead, and it's like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That happens quite often. I'll
yeah.
be doing a gallery, a public greeting, and I'll be doing a gallery, and I'll have somebody's grandma or grandpa that maybe was not very open to mediums or that kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not very religious, right?
Right.
And
Right.
but and so they just thought, hey, or whatever their belief, but and saying, oh my God, like I had it wrong,
Right.
or in their fashion, well, I'll be gall dang, and so, they come through, and saying, just like, and
Yeah.
it's like they're just completely blown away
Yes.
by
Yes.
um, what they're experiencing. They'll be like, I had no, idea. And I always say this, is that, we come up with our best version of what we understand now, even like we're talking right now,
Right.
and then when we die, we're going to get to the other side and go, well, shit, I had it all wrong. And it's
Yes.
like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah. It was.
but all we can do is our best interpretation of what we perceive or what we receive, and to try to do our best to, put that
Exactly.
into words so we understand it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And how about any negative experiences have because I know that one of the things I've spoken to with other mediums that they tell me is after a while gotta learn to put up these boundaries, between yourself and the deceased.
Yep.
I imagine so that you can live life. But have you ever had any negative experiences where maybe before you had a lot of experience under your belt?
Yeah. So it's good that you bring this up, because there was an explosion of what I call the medium genre,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe going back 3-4 years, right? And it seems like everybody wanted to become a medium because it was sound like Reba McEntire was country when country wasn't cool. So maybe I was a medium when the medium wasn't cool. But
Right.
but what I'm trying to get at is saying that you know sometimes people don't realize it's there is an aspect, and I'm not trying to paint a dark picture, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's aspects, especially before you really realize it, where sometimes there's things that aren't the most pleasant to deal with.
Right.
And if you aren't very clear with the spiritual realm of saying, hey, I'm on the clock, or hey, I'm working, and you don't put up those spiritual boundaries or that protection, you can be very affected. One of the things when I started my very first readings, and I was disconnecting to willy-nilly any spirit that was stepping forward.
Right.
It was like, ooh, this is kind of fun. And it's like, and I was playing
Yeah.
with it. And I was like, but there was one, and I was learning how in those early days, the different vibrations of spirits. So meaning I know now how the vibration feels of somebody that is what you consider them in heaven, right? So very, very divine in nature. And then if somebody has either ill intent or in a very negative place, they have a different vibration. So entity or spirit, right? And so this one lady that came forward, she had a very different vibration to her.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, your energy is way different. And it was way low vibrating.
Okay.
And I was just like, because it almost sounded like a slow record, and I was like, it's really easy to talk to you, because a lot of people don't realize, spirits don't lower their energy to talk to mediums. Mediums have to increase their energy and vibration to match that of whatever entity they're communicating with. So think of the spiritual realm emanating at whatever frequency. We got to crank the juice up to talk to them. And so one of the things I remember going, God, it's so easy it's not effortless. And afterwards, it was like I had just, somebody took all the air out of my tires. And I was like, oh my God, I just feel like crap. And I just felt like somebody had just, I don't know, threw mud all over me and everything. And I just felt cranky and sore, just everything. And so I had talked to a friend at the time, and they were like, you got to watch that stuff. They were like, you were talking with whatever spirit it was. They were saying that, some spirits are not so high vibrating, and they zapped your energy. So meaning suck the energy. They're a, you think of an energy vampire, and saying whether it's intentional or they're seeking, like a moth to a flame, they're going to come seeking the energy and saying, you're right there. And if you're talking to them, guess what? They're getting gas from you. And saying, so the thing is that they'll keep on feeding as long as you give it. And saying, and then you'll leave feeling like you are now. Mm-hmm. And then you'll feel like you have an energy cold, I call them. And so you'll feel like you have the flu, or somebody took all your mojo, or whatever you want to call it, for maybe a day or two, or sometimes less. But yeah, I've had some really, in the early days, I had some really eye-opening experiences that I'm like, oh, you idiot, Dean, why did you do that? And I just left with either migraines or felt so debilitated. I'm like, okay, did my energy get zapped so bad that I'm contemplating going to the a regular doctor, or what's going on? And then, usually typically about 4 hours later, it's like I start coming out of it. It's like a fog, right? And then maybe after a good shower and something to eat, and usually too is it seems like because sugar grounds our energy.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, if something like chocolate or something like that as well,
Okay.
it usually, for me anyways,
Mm-hmm.
I'll usually know like if that is something that kind of helps. Um,
Exactly.
so and also good protein. So whether it's like for vegetarians out there, a good vegetarian dish, or usually I'm craving like a huge steak or a huge burger. It's like
Yeah.
I could eat 10 of them. I'm
Yeah, a
just,
lot of protein, quick.
oh yeah. And the body is like, I haven't eaten in 10 days. It's like, I just fed you for lunch.
Yeah.
And it's like, but the body is like, I don't care. Feed me, Seymour. It's like, get in my belly,
Let
right?
me
And
ask you,
I'm, you think,
have you ever had that when you were talking that since you're an empath, have
yeah.
you ever had connection with a spirit that died of some disease, or some illness that was, physically very painful or obvious that you started feeling
Yeah,
what their symptoms were?
all the time during readings. A lot of times during galleries too.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that it works with me is I feel it show up in my body. So
Okay.
a lot of times people hear me will probably say, "Well, I hear them say I feel a lot," and so because I do, I open that psychic aspect of me up to allow that to augment my readings. Because here I'm using my mediumship channel to communicate, but then, I use the receptors, if you will, the psychic receptors within my body to get other information from spirit and saying, that's how they communicate with me and saying, can you feel this? Can you feel, like I can feel people get intubated, like down their throat, like when they
Wow.
get scoped, or like if they were on prolonged oxygen therapy, I can feel the back of the nasal passages or throats dry out. Or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there was this poor older lady one time, her whole arm was just completely like the vein was all blown out and it was all
Okay.
bruised. And what you see, it's very common because people get dehydrated and it's hard for nurses and doctors to get an IV in. But sometimes because that's evidential information, because was probably hard for the family to see that,
Right.
especially on somebody that's dying of cancer, or somebody that is so anemic or whatever that almost looks like bone, and it's like,
Yes.
but then so things that are very even difficult to bring forward. But that's evidence that the client needs or the sitter needs. And
Yes.
the other piece is that, whether it's, I remember one lady during a gallery, she was talking about the glands within the body and becoming completely septic, and
Wow.
everything becoming toxic. And it was almost like I could feel the blood, coursing through, and I knew that it was toxic, and or aneurysms or different things. But I would share one time with I was one of my favorite snacks, Marlene, is raw almonds. Okay.
Okay.
And not that I expect raw almonds from you for Christmas or anything, but I was actually this was quite a while back, and I was sitting snacking on almonds one day, and I went to put my hand back in the container to get some, and my hand just lightly touched the almonds, and all of a sudden I had this coughing fit. Now I was it was almost like I was thinking, oh my God, it's almost like I'm allergic
Uh-huh.
to almonds. Like I was almost literally choking, like I was turning beet red. I mean, it was bad. And my wife was concerned. She was like, oh my God. She goes, are you okay? And she was, and I was like, I knew I'd be okay. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it stopped. And I was like, oh my God. And I said, now watch this. And I took my hand and I put it back in the container and I just touched them. And again, I erupted in coughing, and I was like,
Wow.
and then I was trying to say in the middle of coughing and I was like, okay, you can stop. And I was like, well, whoever's coming forward, they are very allergic to almonds. And I was like, okay, this isn't mine. I don't want this. So a lot of times if I'm experiencing back pain, any type of pain or any symptom in life, I always have to go, is this mine? Is this, is this my neck pain? Is this my ear pain? Is this whatever?
Yes.
I have to discern for myself. And if I go, you know what? That doesn't feel like mine. And then 9 times out of 10, as soon as I go, it's not mine, I don't want it, and then it'll just go poof, like it wasn't there. I can feel it dissolve, and it's
Let me tell
like,
you something. That's incredible.
well, you know what? It's kind of a pain in the butt, to be really honest with you. But it is, But there's a lot of empaths out there. I will just say that I know experience something similar, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm cursed," and they use that word quite and saying because I don't want to hurt. I don't want to feel how they died. I don't want to
Yeah.
know that. I'm saying, well, guess what? I can't stop it, but let's talk about ways to help you control it. And
Right.
so if you can discern whether it's yours or not, that's a huge step. And, because the universe is trying to use you
Right.
as an instrument and saying, you got to, that's how it's trying to communicate to you. Saying like,
Exactly. And that's what I'm thinking, that maybe I imagine some mediums after a while they start like getting shy of that whole
yep.
experience because it's like I don't want to, like you said, I want to experience physically
Well,
whatever.
they start getting burnt out, Marlene. They start,
Hmm.
experiencing burnout because it is so, for some, it is so intense and saying, I can't continue doing this. I can't keep connecting and going through the
Right.
pain or going through this and saying, and I had this conversation early on with Spirit because, I read about some of that and some of the stuff that was coming forward. There was like some pretty depressing and dark stuff. And,
Hmm.
and I was like, look, if you're not giving me ways to be able to help somebody, if you're not giving me the ability to be able to do that, then I don't want to experience that
Okay.
physical sensation or receive that information. You can just find somebody else to do that. But I said, because I want to be able to help somebody with that, not just write it down somewhere in a notebook and then five, ten
Right.
years ago saying, oh, I wrote that, it's like, okay, well, that's great, but I want to be able to help somebody with it. And saying, so if I know that for example, it's great that I know that there's a tsunami coming, but, nobody's going to listen to Dean McMurray, the military medium, to evacuate a third world country, off the coast of wherever. So it's
Right.
like, so give me some actionable stuff. It's great that I know that these milestones are happening, but at the same time, why are you giving them to me? And saying, if there's something that I'm supposed to do with it, great, but other than writing them down in a journal somewhere. So sometimes it does. Sometimes it can be a challenge, and that's why I really ask people. Like, I really question people. Like, why do you really want to do this type of work? Because not saying that people don't have good intentions, but I just want to make sure they realize how serious it can be, because it's not just something for the faint-hearted. You just don't start this and then stop. It's like
Right.
it's once you start down that path, it's like you're already down the rabbit hole, bud. But I don't
Yes.
want to sound ominous either. It's not
No,
I
no,
mean, it's
but
very humbling and rewarding work, but at the same time, it's like you don't do it because it's like, ooh, that would be cool. It's like, no, yeah, you don't do it because it's cool. It's like, it's like,
well, yeah,
you know,
that there's a downside to it if you don't know how to manage it. It's what it sounds like.
yeah, take it with a grain of, obviously I have fun with it. I do
Hmm.
joke when it's appropriate, but at the same time to keep it light. but at the same time, there's, I take it very serious in doing what I do, and because I do understand the level of, I don't know, I guess, giving it the reverency it deserves, and saying, it's not just, it would be like waving a loaded gun around, in a sense, and saying, treat it with some respect, but it doesn't mean to run away from it in fear either. So.
Well, right. And this is, and I want to say, I'm going to blame it on Hollywood. I think sometimes they over glamorize things like this.
Sure.
Like, but they don't highlight, I imagine maybe for somebody who doesn't know how to manage it or understand it, where I could see that could very easily drive you crazy. Like,
Yep.
because,
Well, and it does. How many? I don't know about you, but I know I've run into quite a few people that actually, that have, especially the people that would now, for me, would be probably in their 60s or 70s, even later. That era of generation, if people openly expressed when they were younger that they could hear voices, automatically they were labeled as schizophrenic, or
yes.
had some type of disability, and they were sent off to institutions
Yeah, there was
or
quite a
heavily
stigma
medicated.
attached to
Yep,
that.
and saying, instead of trying to figure out what that meant, are they actually schizophrenic? I don't,
Yeah.
that there's a fine line there, because there are some people that do, that do have conditions, but at the same time, it's like there are a lot of misdiagnosed folks, and it's very easy to
Yes.
do that because they've been plagued since early childhood. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, usually the people that I've talked to saying, I don't think you're crazy, and saying, and you start giving them some credence. Finally, somebody is, recognizing for what it is, and it's not just, don't talk about that.
Well, no, no,
That's
no. And
usually
people don't
that's
realize that.
usually
And,
what it is. They're like, don't
and
talk about it. That's usually what happens.
when I asked you that thing about in childhood, I've spoken to a lot of people that said, yeah, I was having things happen to me since I was a kid. And when I talked to my family about it, they were like, shh, 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 they
Yep.
did, be quiet, don't talk about it. Because, like you said, it carried a stigma. And
Mhm.
sometimes the parents were doing it to protect the child because they didn't want their kid to be that kid. It's not like now
Yep.
where everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool. You speak to dead people." Back then, you were like a hair's breadth away from being crazy, and the next thing from crazy is, like you said, ending up put away somewhere.
Yep.
When they used to have these big, And by the way, contrary to what people think, the majority of people sometimes in these institutions needed to be there. But at the same time, they also would put there people that weren't really, that didn't, like what you said. Maybe they were just experiencing something that, I want to say, for lack of a better word, scared a lot of people. You know,
Right.
Look, clairvoyance or, you know, saying, especially if you didn't know any better, if you were young, talking about grandpa or the neighbor next door coming into your room and having a conversation with you. I'd be
Right.
like, oh,
Can
you
you
know,
imagine? Can you imagine back in, maybe go back 70, 80 years, and having a kid give evidential information to their mom or dad, and have them freaking the heck out and
yeah,
going, "Oh my God, how did you know them? Grandpa died before
right.
you were even born," and saying, "Do not talk about that," or "That's the devil,"
Yeah,
and because really we're only doing, when we parent, let's just be honest, when we parent, we're parenting how we know. Like,
yes,
we try to do things our own way, but really, since there's no book and no course,
right.
well, now there probably is, but the
Too
thing
many of
is
them.
yeah, right, but we really parent how
Yes,
we've learned through our parents,
right.
and good, bad, and different, it doesn't matter. And the thing is that if that was something that was taught in the household or in the church or whatever, that
Yeah,
you will believe this way, and anything outside of that is blasphemous.
Yes.
It is the work of the devil. Whatever that is, then that's what we started to choose to believe, and then we carry on that belief and hand that down to our children, and the cycle continues unless something comes up against that to contradict that, right? And quite honestly, I would have been in the same boat,
Yeah.
Marlene, because I was brought up in a very traditional home, and even though I wasn't big on
Right.
going to Sunday school every weekend, my mom wanted to see me there every Sunday, and
Yeah.
and the thing is that it wasn't. I didn't grow up in a spiritual home,
Right.
and
And people don't realize that some parents, that love their kids, they want to protect them and they say, what's my choice? Even like you said, your kid's not lying because they've just told you something that you as a parent know there's absolutely no way my kid would know that. But what are my
right,
choices? Either shut them down now and protect them because I know that as a kid you're innocent. You might start blabbing around this and then
yep,
they're really going to get hurt. So as a parent, you shut them down because this is better for you.
absolutely, absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah, completely. Yeah, that completely makes sense. And so, and as a parent, we're doing the,
Yeah.
best we can with what we have. And so regardless of how somebody parents, that's, not for, certainly not for me to judge. So,
No.
but the
No.
thing is that it just happens, and it's
Yeah.
a thing, but it's cool when, I see people, when they especially reach out saying, "Hey, Dean, I have a 5-year-old son or whatever, 4-year-old daughter or whatever the case is," and they're seeing, like, one client saw bees in the closet, and there was no actual physical bees, but they were actually seeing um, bees manifest, which was weird, and saying, and different things. So it's like, or like feathers, different spiritual signs or different manifestations
Right.
for kids, and kids are just super intuitive, and just so awesome when you get to talk to them on a spirit, talking about, if they're open to talking about
Yes.
some of that stuff. I mean, because it'll just completely blow your mind, and it's just like, whoa, this kid is so far forward, and
Well,
just like,
I've seen also though, and again, I'm gonna put point at Hollywood. I've seen in lately some trends, Dean, that it's like sometimes I've seen parents try to make their kids sensitive or psychic or medium. And the child, I think like what up to 7 or 8, you don't have that filter there, so you kind of see
right,
things and say things, and then
yep, yep,
and some
yep,
parents want to make their kids like a psychic kid. And it's like, don't do
right,
that. I mean, the opposite. This is the opposite of shutting them down. You're trying
right,
to make your
right,
child into
yep,
something yeah, they might be sensitive because of their age, but not
yep,
truly because that is their path, in other words.
right, right, right,
But you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna get my kid. He's gonna be the next kid, whatever, psychic, medium, whatever, and then we'll have a
yeah,
show, a reality show, or
yeah.
and it's like, don't do that to your kid. That's like,
I I guess my recommendation, I guess, Marlene, is that just allow it.
yes,
For me personally, as a parent of two very sensitive kids, and I got a daughter that's 12, and very talented. I mean, my daughter is extremely intuitive, very sensitive kid, and a very talented medium, but it freaks her out, and that's not her deal. She does not like
no,
it. She will run away from it, and so one of the things that I just learned was saying that, what, it's okay, because as a dad, one of the things that I'm like, if I can foster her intuition development when I'm not there, if she can use that for herself to discern between, like, who to date, where to live, all those life choices, then what better, like, superpower, right? And
yes,
so I just allow it to, we just, um, foster an environment saying whatever she chooses, because we're all going to make our decisions based on whatever, right? And saying whether it's to continue their intuition development or not. And she's really taken a shine to like astrology and stuff. So I'm like, hey, cool, whatever it is. And saying, hey, that's cool. I know nothing about it. And I'm like, but.
And I'm gonna say something. When you said about kids, I have 3 kids. All my kids are grown up. And this is like something that they're born with. Like my middle son, he never liked masks. He never liked makeup. We would go to Disney. My older daughter, she would see Cinderella or one of these big characters, and she'd be like, oh, I want to get their autograph. My kid, he would spy them before they would see it. He would start crying. He would be like, ah! He never, later on, he would never, you can turn off the lights. And of course, like you said, you foster that openness.
Yep.
And when he was like a little bit more, and I knew that he was seeing something, the thing was that scared him later on when he became a little bit like 7 or 8. I would tell Brandon, by the way, he always had to share a room with his younger brother. And even though they had twin beds, they would end up sleeping in the same bed. I said, Brandon, he goes, Mom, I had this man come into my room last night with a gun and he started talking to me. Because, I usually had a couple of chairs in their room where they would.
Sure.
And he sat down and he started talking to me. And I was like, Brandon, he goes, but I didn't want to hear him. And he goes, and another time, I had a little girl come into my room. And I knew he wasn't talking about, like I made this up. It was like he didn't want to.
Right. Yeah. I don't want this. Yeah.
I don't want this. People don't realize that psychic medium things, for some people, it's really scary. When Halloween came around, oh my God, I could not dress anybody up in scary stuff. I had to dress them up as ninjas, like really very non-scary stuff, because for him, the masks, the makeup, all the stuff that you see in Halloween, for him was like a torture. He was born this way. And the reason I'm pointing that out for some parents that want to have their kids do the psychic, you have to embrace it, I guess is my point.
Yeah. They have to want to, they have to want to do it, because, like even with my daughter, like, I knew that she was very gifted in that area, in the mediumship. So I tried to work with her a little bit when, she was younger. And one of the things was that was interesting is that, after she flipped that switch on, so to speak, she got freaked out when people just started showing up that she didn't know, right? And so I was like, well, that kind of happens. You got to learn how to work boundaries. And she was like, no, I want it shut off. And I was like, okay, and it's okay. And I was like, it's going to be all right. And I respected that, because guess what? That was her boundary. Mm-hmm. And she was asking to set that and saying, that's okay, because I don't want it to become something scary for her. Yes. And so, and I don't want it to be, because I'm like, it isn't scary, and I don't want it to be scary for you. And I would rather set that boundary for you and then allow you to develop it in your own way, in your own time, versus saying, I don't even want anything to do with any of it. And saying, so, but yeah, I think that's a great point, Marlene, is that, to allow, because, kids over time will allow them, so don't push anything. Right. That's my point. When it comes to that, is saying, if they're interested in it, they're going to do it. It's just like, most, we'll just use boys, for example. Most boys, on average, you don't have to encourage them or push them to play with, I don't know, cars, right? So usually on the average, they love to play, so the thing is that, just allow the natural progression of whatever it is. Yeah. If they start like, loving to do that, then great. If not, then it'll develop in some way. But
whatever they're good with, rather, like you said, rather than it be a curse instead of a gift, because let me ask you. You mentioned something that you give classes. What is it that you teach? Is it
so I teach a few different courses. So I teach mediumship, obviously. Okay. And then, of course, I teach intuition classes. I
Okay.
call it Intuition University because I believe everybody's intuitive, and
Yes.
basically, I'm just opening or facilitating a space for everybody. And then also we do a big what I call a 12-month spiritual development course. And
Okay.
basically, where that is, Marlene, is where my students, and we, cover everything. So we talk about in-depth doing remote viewing. We talk about mediumship. We talk about astral exercises as well, and intuition development, dowsing, different types of healing, where I bring in guest speakers. And so we're meeting obviously through um, else with students across the country and across the globe. But yeah, so that's been really fun.
So
So
this is
where we
these
do that.
classes are online, right? Is what you're saying?
It's not something that I actually have online where you can sign up for it
Mm-hmm.
because it's usually like data. But if somebody's interested in a class, they can certainly reach out to me. Go
Okay.
through my website at themilitaryMedium.com, and they
Okay.
can say, "Hey, I heard something about a class,"
Okay.
and we can chat.
Okay.
Usually, it's kind of because it's I advertise it and talk about it when it's being given. So
Okay. Okay. I see
that,
what you're
yep.
saying. And you're still
Mhm.
are you're doing a do you have a weekly show?
I do. So it's been kind of fun. Actually, started Memorial Day of 2019,
Okay.
where I have my own radio show here on 95.9 FM here locally,
Mm-hmm.
and at KRFF. Yeah, it's called the Red, White, and You radio show,
Right.
and if and you can actually there's a Facebook site for it, and obviously it's the Red, White, and You radio show.
Right. I've been
And
showing a slide of it of the I took it
I
off your
see
site.
that, and thank you. But one of the things, if people want to catch episodes of that, where I bring all kinds of folks on, and of course the premise of the show is where I focus on military veterans, their families,
Okay.
police, fire, EMS, first responders, and anybody that is doing great things for those organizations or individuals. So that is the premise of that show.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. So Tina, I want to thank you so much for sharing this. That has been absolutely wonderful. You are so interesting. Okay. Because you're you seem like a very well grounded person, contrary sometimes to what people think of as like either psychic or mediums that you're kind of a little bit like,
I
and
Well, I do have some friends that are pretty flighty, so they're pretty psychic. They're
or
sometimes kind of out there.
what is it that you I love the one that you called your wife's
Well,
sensitive
oh, the
friend, the
voodoo
voodoo
chick, the
chick.
voodoo chick, and I just want to preface that too. She doesn't do voodoo, and
I know, but it was
and she went on to become a mentor and a friend as well. But yeah, that was, and I use that still today, Marlene, because that was very real language that I used
yeah.
way back when, and because just I think about those atypical guys and ladies out there
Yes.
that would still probably use that same verbiage for me. It's that this voodoo dude, he
Yeah.
comes in, and
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm all right with that. And
Yes.
it's like, but yeah, the voodoo chick, she's
Yes.
part of
Yeah.
my story forever.
Yeah, and to me personally, I think that for people that they kind of think that if you deal in the psychic or sensitive field, you're like not well grounded, and you obviously are very well grounded.
Well, thank
Um, that's not necessarily because you're involved with that. It's like you're one of these people's like like one of these like yeah man, that kind of thing. That sometimes we need more of that in the paranormal field, believe it or not, as far as I'm concerned. That not everybody is, how can I say it, is that there's a seriousness, and how's this serious because of the nature of what it is, but not so serious. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, we're talking about dead people. Come on.
Right. Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
like, hello.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Right. It's
You
like,
know,
right. Yeah. I
it's
always say, yeah, I don't make balloon animals for a living, so that's
yeah, it's like
so it's right. Yeah.
I mean, if you have somebody that's coming to you because they've lost a loved one, of course you're going to take it seriously. But then at the same time, you got to not let it bleed over into your personality or your personal life, because then, you're dealing with dead people. Hello. It's
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah. So,
so yeah, that,
yeah.
that there's
Some.
that happy medium between one and the other. But again,
Yeah.
I'm going to have it in the credits of the show. But again, your website address is militarymedium.com,
Yep. TheMilitaryMedium.com. Correct.
the
Yes.
or military medium.
TheMilitaryMedium.com. Yep.
ThemilitaryMedium.com. Okay, folks. Again, thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you again. And good luck on all your projects. By the way, you said something. Are you going to be writing a book? Or.
Well, it's been a love-hate relationship for a
Okay.
while now, but yeah, I have been working on a book, and it's been kind of encouraging because been featured in another book, some of my stories and stuff. But so
Okay.
it's kind of fun to dabble in some of that stuff. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that, and obviously we'll
Yes. We need to talk
I'll
again.
be advertising that if and when I get to kicking that out, hopefully in the very near
Yes.
future.
Again. Well, I look forward to it, and I hope you'll come back and you'll share some more stories with us.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, Marlene.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.
Wow. He's really interesting. He's great. I really enjoyed speaking to him. So, what did you guys think, huh? Let me tell you something. I wasn't kidding. People like that, to me, they give a good name to the psychic slash medium field. Because I don't know. Once upon a time, yeah, that field was there was a lot of people. It kind of got a bad reputation because unfortunately there was, I'm talking here maybe like around the turn of the century, you know, there was a lot of charlatans, and there was a lot of people engaged in it. And I have my own theory that I said, even if you have that ability, but if you're making a living from it and you're feeding yourself, you're going to be psychic all the time, which sometimes it's impossible. And then I think sometimes you had some real mediums that fell into uh, tricking people, because if they didn't make that money, if they didn't have a continual flow of people, hey, I need to pay my rent. How's that? So I don't think all the ones that were busted were really necessarily false. It's just that they were trying to deliver on something where they never gave themselves downtime. Okay. Or, like what he said, he does these readings where he's picking up information in his head, whether it's symbols or feelings, or maybe, like what he was saying, physically what people feel. Now, if you look at some of these accounts of these early mediums where they would have to produce ectoplasm, okay, or, some of them had crap, flying all over their heads, and or people coming out of the corner, whatever. Back then, maybe you needed, in other words, you were not going to be believed, okay, if you didn't produce something like a show. Like, in other words, you could, yeah, maybe you could say, I feel this. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. Like, spiritualism took off a lot after the Civil War because, of course, there was a lot of people that had died. Then, of course, the First World War, etc. Can you imagine you're one of these, a family member that comes to a medium because you lost a son or a father or a husband, whatever. And the medium says, yes, I feel somebody's been shot. Like, hello, do you really think you're going to get believed? It's like that would have been so generalized, even though there would have been accurate. In other words, the point I'm making is, back then, people maybe expected to see something material, not a medium saying, I have this pain in my chest or my brain, and I feel like a gunshot. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times when people lost loved ones in war and they knew that they were shot, they never really knew, was this person shot in the back, in the arm, in the leg, in the head, or there it was an explosion. all they ever got, if they ever even got remains back, was that the person had died in war. So now that, of course, fast forward 100 years, now we have, it's more evidentiary in the sense of that it's okay to get validation with more personal information, that that person that's asking about this usually comes through in a way that leaves no doubt this is who they want to speak to. Whether it's a piece of information or a pet name or something that other person would say, there's no way this medium is going to have or know about this. There's just no way. And I wasn't kidding, when he was saying, this thing about, not giving everybody a reading because maybe I might have a past, somebody that's passed on wanted me to. What if this person's not ready for it? What if they don't want it? For a lot of reasons. Maybe emotionally they're very distraught still and they're not ready for it. Or they might not have had the best relationship with that person. And they still, you even have sometimes things where you had a person that committed suicide. And this person that maybe is reading is still might even be mad at this person that committed suicide. There's a process that people go through. And they're at the, I'm really mad at you that you did this. Whether it's because you did it, you didn't come to me. And that person is not ready to hear. Then you would think, well, why wouldn't this person be ready to hear from a loved one, especially in the circumstances of a suicide? Sometimes the timing is not right. So I really applaud Dean when he's saying this. You just don't do that. Contrary to what you see on shows, you just don't come up to people and assume that they are ready to get a message from a loved one, because hey, the dead person wants to talk to you, and sometimes the live person's not ready for it for a host of reasons. You might even have a live person who is one of those that I talked about that doesn't believe in the hereafter, who only believes that that's it. You're here, and once you die, you're dead. Okay? You're pushing up daisies somewhere, and you're worm food, and there's no afterlife. There's nothing. Your soul or your spirit. There's not. That's not real. So, you come up to somebody like that. And by the way, this has nothing to do with that live person loving the person that passed on. Nothing. But they really do believe that. They really do believe that, hey, that's it. When you're alive, you're alive. And when you're dead, you're dead. And end of story. You come up to a person like that really believes this and tells them, I have a message from so-and-so. You think that some of these people are not ready for that. They might even get mad. They might even get mad at you with good reason. Because think about it. Even if a part of their mind is thinking, okay, how would this person know about so-and-so dying or whatever? If this person has built their worldview of their life, of spirituality, of the existence of the soul as it not being there, and here you come along, a stranger sometimes, and you're going to turn it on its head. In other words, you're going to give them this really quick paradigm shift of a personal nature, by the way. Just think about it. If you're one of these people that really believes that there is no afterlife, there is no survival of your soul, your spirit, your person, not necessarily you're a bad person, but you're just a good, normal person, but you really don't believe in that heaven or hell because you're thinking, that's it. When you're done, you're done. Whatever. All of a sudden, here comes this medium, and they're going to give you a message. Give this person a message from so-and-so. Huh? What? No. And I'm just presenting scenarios that could go south real quick for somebody that must give a message, must deliver a message. Again, contrary to what you see on some shows. Because some people, for a variety of reasons, and some of them are even selfish, by the way, are not ready for that. Okay? And, you know, and he even spoke about it. And I asked him, because that's what about people that die, that don't believe in it, that don't believe in the hereafter. And then there they are, and they're like, what? How come I'm alive, but not really, because my body's dead, but I'm alive, me, the me. What happened? I thought this didn't happen. This didn't exist. Now what? Talk about confused. Yeah, there's a lot of spirits, and you know what? Not all the time. Sometimes this is just a transitional thing till maybe a loved one's, the most appropriate person comes along and says, "Hey, come here, come over here. We gotta have a talk. Come here, let's talk." You know, it leads them to where they're supposed to go. But then there's others, depending on their personality, who just get stuck. They kind of like, they get stuck. They don't want to believe it, but here they are, and they kind of like, you know, like this little loop of like, here I am, but I'm not supposed to be here because I died, I think, but now, and they kind of like, and a lot of those sometimes turn into what we call ghosts. And then they just go back into what most human beings do, which is the familiar, as in the place I lived. Or if you were a workaholic, the place I worked at. Or, depends, sometimes going to people that you knew, family, friends. I've described other instances where you'll have these people, you know, follow their bodies around because it's my body. I can't get back in it, but I need to stay by it somehow until I figure this out. This is like a bad dream. And they follow their body around until it's buried. That is, if there is a burial, because, you know, now there's cremation. There's a lot of other options. But yeah, a lot of these people end up being ghosts and very confused. And, you know, that's when hopefully you get a medium to kind of explain things to them, all right? In a way where, and that thing that we talked about where when you're dead, you kind of do sometimes also what the living do is you only see what you want to see. And for those of you, I'm sure like just about everybody's ever seen that movie, The Sixth Sense. So I'm not going to worry about a spoiler alert because everybody knows what the ending is. He, even as a dead person, is living this existence where he sees what he wants to see and which fits in with what his spirit thought it needed to do based on the way he died or because of what happened to the person that killed him. Okay? He wanted, in other words, he wanted to fix it. He wanted to make it right. But for him, in order to do that, he needed the surrounding imagery to fit into his narrative. So he only saw what he wanted to see. Okay? He didn't see where his office was closed. He didn't realize that his wife really wasn't interacting with him. She missed him, but she really wasn't interacting directly with him. In other words, and it wasn't until the very end that he realizes, I am dead. And then he recaptures that moment when he lost his life, because it's almost like he remembered everything about his existence, his past memories, until the point of that I got shot and I passed away. Again, because he had that urgency of, I need to make it right. I need to fix this. I need to, you know, I can't be dead, because if I admit I'm dead, I'm powerless to correct that mistake that drove this person basically to the point that they came back and they tried to kill me because I was stupid and I didn't listen to them, even though that's what I was supposed to do. And, you know, all these things that go through people's mind, and especially if you're responsible. So, I mean, that's the premise of that. That happens a lot, you know, as far as some of these people that are deceased only seeing what they want to see. what he was talking about, this spirit, this ghost of this lady, this Polish lady who lived hundreds of years ago. Maybe not seeing that where she lived at or how or whatever didn't exist. Maybe she was just going through the motions, which is why sometimes you have these ghosts that you see them go through doorways or upstairs or doing things of a structure that's no longer there, because they're only seeing what they want to see. By the way, and he lives in North Dakota, and a lot of out there, they had a lot of frontiers town, Deadwood, all these places that, and some of them that kind of like boomed because it was mining and then they died. But there was a lot of stuff that went out there, was like way out there as far as a very hard lifestyle. Is frontier. It was the Dakota frontier, the Dakota territory, and a lot of stuff happened on the land out there, like what he was saying. And then, of course, fast forward, people living there sometimes have no idea that what took place on that piece of land, and some of it was really, it wasn't like, oh, like nice country living. Sometimes it was a very difficult life, especially if it was a little town. So yeah, that's why sometimes you'll get some really unusual things happening in certain places, especially if this occurred a lot. So yeah, that's way out there. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. I loved speaking to Dean. Maybe next time we come back, we can ask him more about maybe connections with military personnel. As far as I imagine, there's got to be an affinity for him connecting with the military, people that have lost their lives, in the military, because I imagine that maybe if you were in the military, you think this person, besides being a medium, besides being able to communicate with me, will understand the mindset. Okay, so we'll talk to him about that. But again, the link to his website will be on the credits of the show. But you heard him say themilitarymedium.com. So if you want to check out what's going on with him, again, any classes, any events, if he puts out his book, which I will definitely stay on top of that, so he can come back if he does put the book out, so we can talk about that. And again, guys, thank you so much. You're all wonderful, and I really do appreciate that you come back every week and listen to the show. Take care. Bye-bye.